don't know if there's a way.
The color's off
like
on
a
it.
little extra something going on.
Yeah, and that's, I'm getting that too. It's coming from you.
Yeah.
It's coming out of that little thing on the side. That's coming from your computer.
Where does it go? And I've lost my mouse. Alright, we'll just make it work.
Yeah. Almost done. Hold on. Test 1, 2, 3. Okay, you're good to go.
Alright, awesome. Alright, so I'm Melissa Hamilton, and I'm going to be doing a talk on UX. So prefer it to be really conversational, so if you have any questions or if anything comes up, feel free to just pipe up. Definitely love to just make this more of a conversation than a presentation. So I myself, I am a freelance designer, so I spend a lot of time creating user interfaces, not only within websites, but applications as well. And then my day job is actually working here at the eFactory as the receptionist. So I truly believe that my life revolves around making sure user experience is good, both within entering buildings and using different applications. So with that being said, we will go on. So user experience is definitely about what would the user prefer? What is their preference when opening an application, coming to a website page, just what do they want to do? A really good example here is this walkway. So design says we have to go up and around, but really, how many people actually go up and around? Like, we see this everywhere. Okay, there we go. All right, so one thing to really clear up a little bit is UX is not user interface. User experience is actually above the user interface. A lot of times it gets used interchangeably. It's not really interchangeable, it's more one is the higher of the other. So user experience, again, working on overall experience of using the product. User interface is how the user and product interact directly. So within this, it's a really good example with ketchup bottles. How many people, the one on the right here, how many of you guys know how to use that as the way it was designed? Like, yeah, so you know how to use it. How do you use it? Like,
just open it up and squirt it.
Yeah, so like this one here.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
you said right.
Sorry. I'm like right, left. Where are we at? Yeah, so the really tall, slender one. How do you use that one? Like, what is your preferred method?
The left. What?
Here. Sorry, I will point.
Well, you can open it and then turn it over and shake it.
So you're shaking it, trying to get it out. Anybody else have a different way they use it?
Don't you have to put the logo just right on the bottom of it?
Right. That's the one. Yeah.
Put a knife in it, scoop it out.
Exactly. So there's like 3 different ways it can be done. And really the way you're supposed to do it is, like you said, get the logo just right and then hit the back of it as hard as you can and hope something comes out without a huge mess. Yeah. So like this one, with the user experience, how many different ways are there to use it? Like, anybody have a different way of using it besides just opening it up and squeezing it? Like, it's intuitive. So good user experience is making sure that what you're designing is intuitive for the user without having to have all these extra rules. So John Louis Gasset said, simple is hard, easier is harder, invisible is hardest. When you're designing a good user interface, you want to make it seem like it's not even something that the user has to think about. It needs to be invisible to what they're doing. So brief history, I think it kind of just pulls it all together. So in about 4000 BC is when feng shui started. And so what does feng shui have to do with UX? Well, feng shui, translating to wind and water, referring to spatial arrangement of objects and the energy flow of the rooms, so qi. So just really focusing on how people would prefer to move through the rooms and how we can make sure the energy moves best around the rooms. So then we jump a little bit later on and go to Frederick Winslow Taylor. He came up with Taylorism, or scientific management. So the focus is on optimizing the relationship between humans and their tools, which it got him a lot of flack because it was trying to optimize for the tools. So the human element wasn't considered within it. And then they come over here to Toyota, and they focused more on the human aspect within their assembly. So that really helped. And my presenter notes. Oops. Okay. Nope. Okay. So then with Henry Dreyfuss, he really was a designer that focused on making products better for the people that are using it. He has this really good quote that talks about making sure that your design is successful, and the only way to ensure that is that people are able to use it safely and efficiently. So he kind of came up with like the Hoover vacuum and the tabletop telephone. So that was kind of his pull within it. And then the next one, Walt Disney. People argue that he's the first UX designer. When you think of Disney World, what part of it do you guys get excited with, like Disney World or Disney in general? Like, is that something exciting for you? So when you think of Disney World, like what is it that is so exciting about it? Anybody?
All of the characters come to life.
Yeah, characters come to life, and then if you're there, like why do you think people would be so excited to go?
It's fun.
It's fun, yeah. My husband put it, he really wants to go to Disney World because when you're there, you don't realize that you're in a swamp in the middle of Florida. You don't realize that. You think you are on Main Street, or you think you're within the animal kingdom. Like, they spend so much time focusing on transporting you to another space, so that it's just efficient and easy for you to go from one spot to another. And that's really his pull within it. So then we come up to the 1970s, and then we come to Xerox, Apple, PC era, when they're designing more for ease of use and, being compact. And then Donald Norman is the one who is credited with first coining the term user experience. And so he worked within Apple and really helped bring Apple's vision in. So to quote Steve Jobs, some people think design means how it looks, but if you dig deeper, it's really about how it works. So why put him up here? Why is he like such a thought leader within UX? Let's think about Android versus Apple. How many of you have an Android phone? You have an Android phone. Okay. How many have an Apple phone? Everybody else. Okay, right.
I develop Android apps.
Okay, so yeah, you develop with an Android, and then everybody else, why do you guys have an Apple phone?
Privacy.
Privacy? Privacy.
I have to say at the first when I was of that age, growing up in high school, it was pretty and shiny, and I had to have it. So this is more of a marketing play, but now honestly, every once in a while my work gives me a Windows phone.
Oh no.
And it's a very nice doorstop or paperweight. So people have tried to get me to use Android or, like I said, a Windows phone, but my iPhone is always within reach.
Yeah, and it's always just right there. Like, it's everybody's companion. They've made it so that way it is the easiest for you to pick up and use. Like you said, Windows phones, they've basically turned into paperweights. It's hard, but true. And really within Apple, they strive to focus on user experience first. So that's definitely something for them. So what does this all mean? How does this all work within what you're designing or building? Really, to have a good UX design, you are balancing all of this information. You're balancing the main information you want to get across to the client, the user's needs, and of course you're going to have business goals, because who's paying your paycheck? Unless you're doing a freelance project, but even then, you still need to be able to balance what the company wants, what the user wants, and then just how to get the general information out. And most products that have all three of these clearly defined do really, really well. So, how do we pull them all together? So these are just 4 basic principles. These are the 4 that I use within my design at all times. There's a book out there called Universal Principles of Design by William Lidwell, Kritna Holden, and Jill Booter. And they list 125 principles. So really, it's hard to say what the actual principles are, but within it, there's at least 3 of them that are consistent, being accessibility, clarity, and consistency. And then I prefer transparency just because, I find that a lot of people want to know where their information's going and what's going on. So these are my 4. If you have others, feel free to throw them out there. Okay. So first one being accessibility. Definitely including all people, but a lot of times when we think of accessibility, what group of people do you think of? Mm-hmm. Handicap, special needs. Is there another group?
It's like my parents.
So like older
Adults.
Yeah. Yep. So definitely, we've got that thought, but really it's about including everybody with all abilities. It's taking into consideration, okay, who is this product for? And what do they prefer, or how do they prefer to use the technology? So maybe just basically asking yourself, do they have basic computer skills? Would they be able to take this product and intuitively use it because they have that previous knowledge? And do they have basic understanding of how your product should work? Were you able during the marketing to let them know that, hey, this is how our product should work, and clearly convey that? And then do you have a clear way to help those that don't understand? A really good example that I have is I went through a class recently on selling crafts online through an online platform that's very, very popular, but was really bummed out by what I found is they offered a class, they offered 2 different types of books, and they offered a walkthrough as you're signing up, but none of it meshed, none of it went together. And I had a lady sitting next to me, and she's the older generation, and she had never used a laptop before. So here she is, older generation. You think, hey, they're getting ready for retirement. They want to go ahead and maybe start selling these crafts and stuff that they've been able to create. Maybe they want to, build this. Well, they've just excluded this market because this lady didn't know how to even get on the internet. And then there were so many bugs within the UI that this lady was just like, I feel like I'm doing this completely wrong. This isn't for me. And she left halfway through the class. And it's just so heartbreaking to see that products aren't able to mesh with those that you think it should be for. So definitely keeping your user in mind, making it accessible to them, and then also making sure that, for those who are handicapped and having those extra needs, that you're using like the alt text and contrast and keeping all of those in mind as well. Okay, so then next one being clarity. Make sure the user understands exactly what you're trying to convey. Statistics show you have 50 milliseconds before the user creates an opinion of what they're looking at. So that's 1/20th of a second somebody's already made an opinion of what they're seeing. And then that gives them about another 10 seconds to decide if it's worth continuing on or not. So you have to make sure that your information that they're looking for, because 85% of people are looking directly for that information, you have to make sure that it's to the point, it's very specific to what they're looking for, and doesn't have extra jargon that they need to figure out. So yeah, just being really concise. Next one being consistency. So this is where branding comes into play with everything. You can be creating an app, and most apps have a website with them. But if your app and website don't go together, it can really lose credibility with the people that you're working with, because they want everything to look the same. So make sure that the media is the same, that your product looks the same, font, images, everything. And then other things that people look for as well. Make sure that you aren't switching up well-known keyboard shortcuts. Like copy and paste aren't changed, they're kept the same, just to avoid, confusion and frustration within that. Also making sure that navigation structures follow kind of what the norm is. At this point in time, navigation structures have morphed into the sticky headers with like 3 or 4 items, and if it needs to be condensed, the hamburger menu, and just sticking within that. Definitely keeping with don't fix what isn't broken. So if it's been working for another company, feel free to use it. Feel free to pull it in, make it yours, but stick to the general layout so that way people will have that intuitive understanding of how to use it. And the last one, transparency. The users want to remain in control of their information. And they definitely want to be shown over told. They don't want to read like this super long piece of text about what's going on or anything, just being clear and concise. And they want to know where they're at in your product. How can they get back to where they were? Is it easy to move back and forth from one screen to another? And if an error occurs, can they recover easily? Is it something that they can do, or is there an easy way to get help for it? And like, really one of the things that I try to do the most is see how many words I can take out before my sentence loses its understanding. Because a lot of times people prefer to have that conversational piece instead of all of that. So, anybody have any questions on those principles or any they want to include? No? Okay. All right, so we've kind of gone over those principles. So what does that look like within the process? What is the basic UX process? Across the board, it follows research, design, prototyping, testing, and measurement. And this just all goes in a circle, and sometimes they loop back on each other. It's a fluid process. But during any good UX development, all of these will be taken into account. And a lot of these also take in psychology, user research, information architecture, and product management. So as a UX designer, you have to take all of that in to be able to create this piece. I think sometimes it can be a misnomer to be called a designer, because some people think you're actually creating the actual end user interfaces, and sometimes that's not even the case. Sometimes you are truly just trying to develop a way for people to easily navigate through whatever you've been given. Okay, so first part, research. When you're researching, you are identifying the user's specific pain points. So where in the application are they tripping up? Where is it a struggle for them to be able to use the product intuitively. And a lot of it takes the psychology portion of getting into the user's head and understanding what their mind frame is. So, for example, like here, empathy maps. We will use empathy maps to kind of get into somebody's head, to understand what their day-to-day thought processes are. So the first part is definitely thinking about, okay, what does a person do on a day-to-day basis? How do they go about their day? What is a priority for them to complete? And then what can they say during that time? How do they feel about what they're doing? And what is their thought process through all of it? It can be kind of hard to get into that. So, and a lot of times it's not based around specifically the product. Sometimes it's even based around just what you think in their day-to-day life. If you want to focus on the product, a good place to look is like within reviews and feedback with other products that are similar to what you're designing. So a lot of times, like the app integrations and everything, when they have the reviews at it, definitely look at those, see what people are saying, because people are super honest within those, and it's just a really good point to look. So with those empathy maps, a lot of times it's done with Post-it notes. So everything you think of, you put within a Post-it note, and then you can just sort it into different buckets. And the buckets are the items that match or that go closest together. And this is really fun to do within a team because you can get different thought processes from different people. So the next one being journey maps. So you take your product as it is now, and you take this person that you just created, and you walk them through what their thoughts, feelings, and actions are while they're going through this process. So within this, the activity is what they're doing. What do they have to click on? What is the process that you have lined out for your product? Touch point is going to be more of what they are feeling while they're moving through it. So what is their emotions with having to, say you have a login page and it asks for 5 different pieces of information. How do you think somebody's going to feel being requested to fill in that much information? Is it really necessary for your application? What would they prefer to do when completing that? And then experience is going to be like the overall feeling afterward of is this going to make them more frustrated? Is this what level of pain point is this going to be? And then the opportunity. How can you make it better? What is something that you can do to alleviate the pain point? So looking at it, do you really need that much information? Do you really need all the different extra click-throughs? What do you actually need to get to the end? So then you pull those all together and thinking of those pain points as preferences. What is their preference to how to use the application? And still remembering that you still have to balance the information user needs and business goals. And then look at them overall, figure out which ones are important, and also weigh it with what you have on hand. What resources can you devote to fixing that pain point? And then just evaluate what can be done now, what we can do in the future, and what is something that we want to wait on for a while. So definitely allowing decisions on what you can adjust and what you can't, and then moving on. So next part is the actual design part. I simplify it down into just thinking about how do I want the user to actually go through the application. Based on the pain points, how would I like the user to perceive what's going on? I usually don't go into storyboarding, but I have a general idea of what comes next. So if you want, you guys can draw it out, you can write it out, but really just having that playthrough of what you expect. And then prototyping. Prototyping is a huge part within this process, and a lot of times people skip over to this point, which is totally understandable. You have this product, you want to get it out there, you want to get the ideas going, but this is a really huge piece that I learned the hard way. So prototyping, using Figma, InVision, and Sketch, there's a bunch of others out there, to be able to pull together what it should look like without having to worry about actually coding everything out. I used to code everything from hand and then scrap the idea because I hit a bug that in the end I don't think it would have looked that way anyway, so the bug wouldn't have existed. So you cut a lot of time out by having that there. And most programs are going to have the ability to be able to click through each one and kind of get a general idea. And then moving on to testing. It's a really big piece, is to make sure that after you've got the prototype out there, get it into your users' hands. It doesn't have to be like go out to the entire market. It doesn't even have to go to specific end users sometimes, depending on the data that you're looking at. Like just make sure that somebody's able to use it, and you can watch them use it and watch them go through it, and think to yourself, okay, did you have to explain to them what you were hoping would happen? Did you have to explain to them how to get to the next point? Did new pain points come up? Really evaluate where you're at, see where it is. And one thing that I really like to do is, I have a background in manual quality assurance with different technologies. And our favorite thing was just to sit and try to break it. So just tell them, like, hey, see if you can break it. Because that will definitely tell you, okay, so they were able to break it. Is this something that a common user is going to do? Or is this a really far edge case that we should be aware of, but let's not really take it into consideration per se? So definitely important to have the testing piece within it. And then measuring. So continuously review the product. Continuously go back, even after it's hit the market, after you've got all of what you feel the pain points are out. Go out there and see. Be open to feedback, be open to changes. And the biggest thing, make sure your code base can scale, because you don't want to have to put all this time into code and have to dump the whole thing and code again. So definitely just being open to it. So basically, user experience. You've got to start with the customer experience and work backward toward the technology, not the other way around. Okay, so that was a lot. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts, anything within it? No. It's all self-explanatory.
Good, it's good info, but you described it well, at least for me.
Okay, awesome. That's good. Does anybody?
Did you want general questions or specific to?
No, anything.
Well, I do have something I'm working on right now that I have an app that's been on the market for 7, 8, 9 years, and the biggest problem has been people have said user interface, but I think they mean user experience. And so I'm totally redesigning it right now. And one question that's I've been kind of struggling with is, I mean, there's certain things that are going to be very similar, but there's certain things it's going to be different for users. And I have tens of thousands of users who, some of them have been using it almost the whole time it's been on the market. So how do I handle the user experience for the people who have been using it a long time? Even though the new experience, I think, is going to be a lot better, but I don't know how to get them to adjust.
To move over with it.
I was having trouble picking that up. Can you repeat the question and the answer?
Okay, yeah. So, question being, you have this app that's been out for a long time, you have thousands of users, and you're wanting to redo the interface. Interface is going to be better in the long run, but how do you transition the users over to that new interface, right? Okay, so that can be done a lot of different ways. I would definitely look at, definitely giving them a heads up saying, hey, the user interface is going to be changing. Maybe giving them an example of what to expect could be a good way to kind of slowly integrate them in with the new. Also, one of the things that's really handy is doing, a lot of them have been doing, like, if they have new user interface, they'll do like a quick walkthrough. So like where, the hot spots will pop up on the screen and kind of explain, hey, this functionality's moved here. This functionality's here now. I don't know. It's mobile though, so that might be a little bit more difficult just because of screen real estate.
That's doable. I'm slowly transitioning, and them wouldn't be doable with an app because they're just going to suddenly see a new interface.
Yeah. Another option could be giving them the option to stick to the old interface if you want to keep that as a possibility. Say, hey.
A lot of upkeep.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of options, and definitely testing. Test it out. Maybe pick a section of your of the clients and have them try it out and see if they're able to easily integrate over to the new one, or see if maybe we need to give them something extra.
I like
Definitely
the
an
built-in
option.
tooltip idea because you can track that on a per user basis. And the first time they see it is the only time they have to see it.
Yes.
So that's something that we fail to do. We run the old one too long.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you don't like the new one, come over here to let you know. But it's not the right. I don't know. At least for us, maintenance becomes a humongous issue. So that's a great idea.
I mean, I've seen that a lot of times when you have the option to use the old one. How many, do you know the percentages or anything of people who will tend to stick with an old?
Oh, yeah.
I know people don't like change.
In our case, until we force them to, you'll have a high percentage that just stay on the old one. They'll see that link inviting them to the new one. Now, if we switch it over to where by default it takes them to the new one, at least with our product, where we probably have thousands of people on there as well, then you will have a very small percentage go to the old one, and in most cases, we'll try to reach out to them to find out why that is. And at least in our experience, it's because there's a problem with the new one. It's not just because they're not wanting to step outside of their comfort zone. Like maybe it's missing a feature that they need, or the feature is not working the way they expect, or they can't figure that specific feature out. Because, I mean, with managing data, people might need to run some special report that the normal user wouldn't need to see, or access some data that the normal user wouldn't need to see. So in our experience, when you push people over to the other side, it's usually not a big problem, but until you do that, they usually just stay. You'll start to see.
So it's probably better to just go ahead and push them to the new interface, and then give them the tips.
An advantage of making the old interface available, or the new interface available as a preview, at least for us, is that the type of customer or user who accesses the new interface is usually technically capable and able to give us great feedback. So if they see something that doesn't make sense to them, we're able to hear about it long before we flip the switch for everybody, which is good. So that would be an advantage. But
I do have the option of putting out a beta version.
Okay,
Yeah,
something like that might be a good approach.
Definitely, and you can definitely get a sample that way. That's a good way to go. Yeah. Any other questions, use cases, anything that you guys have seen while you're designing or trying to implement things?
Just anecdotal piece.
Okay.
Y'all may have seen this in the web dev Slack the other day, but so I have a routine of waking up early in the morning to work, like at 3, and I'll get a bunch of work done. And occasionally those mornings are just ridiculous because I'll hit some sort of snag, and I know that I've got to like get in the shower and stuff by like 7, right? And so sometimes like that cutoff is just unbearable because I want to fix something, right? And so it was the morning of April 1st, just the other day, and I had a stupid bug. Like it was just ridiculous, and it was keeping me from getting anything done. And naturally, where do you go? Stack Overflow, right? And they had their like obscene throwback web thing with like unicorns and glitter. No. I was so pissed because like, I was so rushed and trying to solve this, and like it just threw off my groove entirely on there. And like I had a visceral reaction just to how bad it was. So much so that I couldn't find a way to get out of it, because usually something like that there's like a get me out of this mode sort of thing. I didn't see it anywhere because I was so flustered. And then later on I was bitching about it in the Slack, and Fred had pointed out, he's like, there's a button to leave, and yeah, it was over on the sidebar, but like I couldn't find it because I was so stressed out. So anyways, just thought I'd share that. That's a very poor UX thing.
Yeah.
It's funny and all that.
It was annoying, but I didn't realize it was April 1st.
Oh.
I just groaned. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Well, it was just weird because I like that was first time in a long time that I felt just so angry with the experience that I was ready to break my computer.
Yeah.
I was so upset. Anyways, just thought I'd share that.
Yeah. Definitely a good point. And that's something that we try to solve for. One of my freelance projects right now is creating a telemedicine app. So we have to have an app where the therapist can sign on and the clients can sign on without the therapist being present. So how do we make that work? How do we make it so intuitive that somebody who is having psychiatric problems can just click on and go and not have to worry about, downloading different drivers, making sure microphone's enabled, and just going. It's huge. Definitely
Microphone has got to be one of the biggest pains in the life with software ever. Oh,
Can imagine.
Have you come across any good I noticed like Hangouts and other things more recently have started to tell you it'll recognize if you're trying to talk and your like mic level is down, or often it'll tell you your microphone's muted if you're trying to talk. That's really good.
Wow.
But I mean, Hangouts overall is just kind of a clunky experience. Just curious if you've come across any that like solve specifically that microphone issue really well, because it's a turd.
I haven't yet. I mean, it's definitely been, I don't know. I was thinking the other day, we were trying to use Zoom here at the E-Factory, and it was just microphone issue after microphone issue, and it just...
Zoom has a really crappy UX overall.
So true.
Yes, most definitely.
When we host a meeting, I'm trying to watch everybody's camera, and not everybody has a camera, but if they do, I'm watching to see if any of them are trying to talk, and I'm like, Bob, you need to turn on your camera. I can see you trying to say something. Because otherwise, they'll just chat, and then wonder why nobody's saying anything. It's ridiculous.
So true.
Question. I happened into a conversation with a nonprofit, and they were looking to build an app or some kind of web, basically an app to not necessarily count the homeless, but to literacy rates. So
okay.
And I was he was kind of explaining to me their goals for the app, and the first one that popped into my head was do they have? I mean, if you have lower reading levels or literacy rate, do they actually have the funds to have the technology, the app they're trying to create to reach them? And he kind of just looked at me like I was crazy. I'm I don't know what the financial situation is, but I mean, if you're lower income, you might not necessarily have higher education, whereas the app that you need them to use needs to be super basic. And if they're still on a old school Motorola, you're not going to reach them at all, and it's not going to help you build your numbers or help you, further your program.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of like, I threw a rock straight at his head and just stopped all momentum on him, and he's like, I don't know. I'm like,
yeah.
He's like, did it come off when you guys were brainstorming? I was like, it's for the Springfield-Greene County area, so it's going to be a little bit more affluent, but still there's a pocket that can't afford smartphones, even if it's the most basic one of them all.
Yeah.
It's just like,
They're just like,
oh God, it's due in a couple of weeks. I'm like,
I can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No specific numbers. I don't have numbers to back this up.
Okay.
But are you familiar with the Hack for Good events?
I've been here. I'm new to the.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome.
Yeah.
So they are a yearly event, and each one partners with community people to build something. And one of the first ones was an app built for the homeless population to easily find resources like food, shelter, clothing, these kinds of things. And the lady that was kind of spearheading that project explained it really well, because we too were like, do they even have smartphones? Like that's like the most basic question anybody's gonna come up with at first. And she explained it really well. She explained that a lot of them have recently become homeless, right? So they had a life before that, right? And of course, pretty much everyone's got a smartphone. In addition to that, if they have found themselves homeless for a while, there are a lot of programs that are donated phones to give out to people in need. And connectivity-wise, there's Wi-Fi everywhere, right? So even if they don't have active cell service on it, they're getting Wi-Fi everywhere. So to my understanding, based on what she said, most of them have phones. So
I wonder if how that carries over to literacy rates, and just depending on what demographic they're going for. I mean, if it's younger population, or if it's my parents and above, that a whole different world. When they were at school, they had to stop, or so.
Yeah, it would be cool to see real numbers, because heck, I mean, you just look around. You're hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't have some sort of smartphone. Like it's incredibly rare. Now the quality of phones always going to be different, right? Like probably, so many base level Android phones. But
well, and just some of the technology that my parents are, I would honestly say addicted to. On their iPhones, they were on late generation 5s, and that app wasn't working, and they freaked out.
Yep.
So it's just like, the population that used that was really geared towards,
that would be the bigger
keeping
concern.
up with the technology or whatnot. And I had to convince them that you're gonna have to put some money into a newer phone if you want to keep getting your information through that item.
Yep.
And it took a solid 6 months of convincing them every time they complained. It's like, no, really, you gotta figure this one out, because I'm not gonna listen to you complain.
That is an interesting issue. Like even just my aunt and uncle, my uncle's got, just one of those dinky little iPhones, that like you hold it and you can't even believe they were ever that small.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. And he just suffers through that thing, It's crazy. Like I get on there, you tap something, it's like,
wait.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite that bad, but it was very close, and they were frustrated. So it's like, you're complaining to me, but I'm like, you're problem. It's like, this is your options.
Yeah, it's an interesting world.
Yeah.
It's definitely. Okay.
Cool.
Something from the designer point of view, that you kind of have two customers as well. One is, the CEO or the chief marketing somewhere, and then their customer. And a lot of times the chief likes to see their big logo and likes to have like lots of branding on their own, taking up a lot of screen real estate and this sort of thing. And sometimes it takes quite a bit of convincing to say, no, you don't want that big old logo next to this little hamburger menu, because then we're not going to be able to use it. And it's pretty amazing to me, a lot of people at that level feel that way, that this is our branded experience.
Yeah.
I've got to convince them from the design side to say, what is your customer going to do? Once they're on your site, they'll know it's you, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It's definitely hard because, you know, you want to be able to balance what industry is saying, but you also know that, like, in the end, it's going to benefit them more to go for what the customer wants. And, like, I think it gets lost at times because people get so excited about their logo, or they get so excited about the fact that they have this, that, or the other thing, and you know, definitely understand the excitement too. But yeah, as UX, we definitely have to pull them in and say, wait, like, maybe that's not the most important thing that you're looking at. Yeah, definitely. All right.
Well, let's give Melissa a big round of applause, and then stick around. Good job tonight. Are you able to stick around for a little bit in case people have more questions?
Definitely. I'm here.
I'll close out the stream so people aren't trying to hear the conversation because it's not picking it up real well at this point. But thank you so much.
So good, yeah. Thank you guys. I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.